The stars looked different from the bridge of the Vulcan warship Dominator. Admiral Corvex stood with his 4 arms crossed behind his back, watching the empty space ahead. His red eyes glowed in the dark as he studied the sensor readings. Something was out there. "Admiral," called his second-in-command, Captain Thek. "We found something on the edge of the system." Corvex turned his massive head. The Vulcans were proud warriors. They had thick gray skin like armor and stood nearly 3 meters tall. For 200 years they had conquered world after world. No species had ever defeated them in battle. "Show me," Corvex said. The main screen lit up. There, floating alone in the darkness, was a small ship. It looked nothing like Vulcan vessels. The hull was smooth and white, with strange markings on the side. The ship was tiny compared to the Dominator, maybe 1/10 the size. "It appears to be from the species called humans," Captain Thek reported. "Our databases show they come from a small blue world in the outer regions." Corvex smiled, showing his sharp teeth. Humans were new to this part of space. The Vulcan Empire. Had heard rumors about them but never met any. Perfect. A new species to conquer. "How many ships do they have with them?" Corvex asked. "Just this one, Admiral. Our sensors show it is alone." "One ship?" Corvex laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound. "These humans must be very brave or very stupid." Inside the human ship New Sol, Ambassador Lee Dae-ho was reading reports on his tablet. He was a calm man in his 50s with gray hair and kind eyes. This was his 3rd diplomatic mission to unknown species, and he always hoped for peace. "Sir," said Captain Park Jin-woo from the pilot's chair, "we have company." Lee looked up at the main screen. A massive gray ship was approaching them. It was huge, covered in weapon ports and armor plating. The design looked aggressive and warlike. "Can you identify them?" Lee asked. "Vulcan Empire ship," replied Kim So-ra, his young aide. She was reading from the ship's computer. "The database says they are a warrior culture. They have conquered 17 star systems in the past 2 centuries. Captain Park's jaw tightened. He was a career military officer, but this was supposed to be a peaceful mission. "Should I power up our weapons?" "No," Lee said firmly. "We came here to talk, not fight. Open a communication channel." The screen flickered, and suddenly a massive alien face appeared. Admiral Corvex stared at them with burning red eyes. Lee could see sharp teeth and scars across the alien's face. "I am Admiral Corvex of the Vulcan Empire," the alien said in broken but understandable English. "You are in our space without permission." Lee stood up and bowed slightly. "Greetings, Admiral. I am Ambassador Lee Dae-ho of the Human Federation. We come in peace, seeking dialogue and friendship between our peoples." Corvex made a sound that might have been laughter. "Peace? Your little toy ship is far from home, human. This sector belongs to the Vulcan Empire now." "We did not know," Lee said honestly. "If we have crossed into your territory by mistake, we apologize. We can leave immediately." "Too late for that," Corvex replied. His red eyes gleamed with hunger. "You have seen our ships, our technology. The Vulcan Empire cannot allow potential enemies to carry information back to their home worlds." Captain Park stepped forward. "Ambassador, I think we should—" "Silence!" Corvex roared through the screen. "You will surrender your ship immediately. Prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in your destruction." Lee raised his hands, peacefully. "There is no need for threats, Admiral. Surely we can discuss this matter like civilized beings." "Civilized?" Korvax's laugh was ugly. The Valkans are civilized. We bring order to chaos. Your species looks weak and soft. You will make good slaves when we conquer your worlds. The communication ended abruptly. On the bridge of the new Sol, silence fell like a heavy blanket. So, much for diplomacy, Captain Park muttered. He turned to his security team. Lieutenant Cho Min-ho, prepare the crew for boarding. Hide anything classified. Lieutenant Cho was a young but experienced soldier. Should we resist, Captain? Park looked at Ambassador Lee, who shook his head sadly. No violence. We are outnumbered and outgunned. But remember your training. 20 minutes later, the new Sol shuddered as the Valkan ship locked onto them. With a tractor beam, the human ship was pulled into the massive cargo bay of the Dominator. Through the windows, they could see Valkan soldiers waiting with weapons. The airlock hissed open, and Admiral Korvax entered with a squad of warriors. Each Valkan carried a weapon that crackled with energy. They towered over the humans, making the bridge feel cramped. So these are humans, Korvax said, looking down at them with interest. Smaller than I expected, weaker looking. He walked around Ambassador Lee like a predator studying prey. You claim to represent a federation. How many worlds do your people control? We have colonies on 47 worlds, Lee answered truthfully. 47? Korvax seemed surprised. That is more than I expected for such a young species. But numbers mean nothing without strength. The Admiral picked up Lee's tablet from the table. The device was far more advanced than anything the Valkans had seen. The screen was crystal clear, and it responded to touch like magic. Interesting technology, Korvax admitted. Where did you steal this from? We did not steal it, Kim So-ra spoke up bravely. Humans made this ourselves. Korvax backhanded her casually, sending the young woman to the floor. Captain Park started forward, but Valkan weapons immediately pointed at him. Lies, Korvax snarled. Primitive species do not create such things. You must have found this technology, or taken it from your betters. He gestured to his soldiers. Take them to the holding cells. Search every inch of this ship. I want to know what other secrets these humans are hiding. As the Valkan soldiers forced them from the bridge, Lee helped. Kim So-ra to her feet. Her lip was bleeding, but her eyes burned with anger rather than fear. Are you all right? Lee whispered. Yes, sir, she replied quietly. But I do not think they will listen to reason. Captain Park was walking behind them, his hands bound. As they passed through the corridors of the alien ship, he noticed everything. The number of soldiers, the layout of the passages, the location of weapon emplacements. His training as a military officer was taking over. More importantly, he was thinking about the small device implanted behind his left ear. Every human diplomatic mission carried the same equipment. It was standard procedure when entering unknown space. The quantum beacon could send a message across thousands of light years in seconds, but using it would mean admitting that peaceful contact had failed. It would mean calling for help that might arrive too late. Worse, it would mean that humanity's enemies had learned their location. In the holding cell, as Valkan guards locked heavy doors behind them, Captain Park made his decision. The Valkans had shown their true nature. They spoke of conquest and slavery. They struck a defenseless woman and threatened to destroy anyone who opposed them. Such behavior could not be allowed to continue. When the guards moved away from the door, Park activated the beacon. The signal was invisible and silent, but it carried a simple message. First contact failed. Hostile species. Diplomatic mission compromised. Send help. The message raced across space faster than light, heading toward human worlds that Admiral Corvex had never imagined existed. But the Vulcans would learn soon enough that threatening humanity was the biggest mistake they had ever made. The holding cell was cold and dark. Ambassador Lee Dae-ho sat on a metal bench watching Kim So-ra press a cloth to her split lip. Captain Park Jin-woo paced back and forth like a caged animal. Lieutenant Cho Min-ho and the other security officers sat quietly, but their eyes were alert. "How long do you think before they come for us?" Kim So-ra asked. "Not long," Lee replied. "They want information about our worlds, our defenses, our technology." The door opened with a harsh grinding sound. Admiral Corvex entered with two other Vulcans. One carried a strange helmet covered in wires and blinking lights. The other held what looked like a medical scanner. "Time for questions," Corvex announced, his red eyes fixed on Ambassador Lee. "You will tell us everything about human space. How many ships do you have? Where are your military bases? What weapons do you possess?" Lee stood up slowly. "I have already told you we come in peace. The Human Federation seeks only friendship with other species." "Friendship?" Corvex laughed. "The strong do not seek friendship with the weak. They take what they need and destroy what opposes them. This is the Vulcan way." The Admiral gestured to his technicians. "We have better ways to get answers than asking politely." The Vulcan with the helmet approached Lee. "This device reads thoughts and memories. It can be painful, but pain teaches important lessons. You cannot force information from unwilling minds," Lee said calmly. "Torture only produces lies." "We shall see," Corvex replied. They forced the helmet onto Lee's head. Immediately, his body went rigid as electricity shot through his brain. The Vulcan technician stared at a screen showing strange patterns and images. For several minutes, Lee endured the mind probe. Images flashed through his consciousness as the machine tried to pull out his secrets. The Vulcans saw fragments of memory, Earth with its blue oceans and green continents, space stations orbiting distant worlds, ships traveling between stars. But something was wrong. The images were confusing and unclear. The Vulcan technician frowned at his readings. "I am seeing strange things," he reported to Admiral Corvex. "There are images of massive structures in space, fleets of ships, worlds covered in cities and factories. But the numbers make no sense." "What do you mean?" Corvex demanded. "The memories show thousands of ships, Admiral. Maybe tens of thousands, orbital platforms larger than moons, industrial complexes that span entire continents. It cannot be real." Corvex studied the screen showing Lee's memories. He saw flashes of enormous shipyards hidden inside asteroids, fleets so large they blocked out stars, weapons that could crack planets in half. "Impossible," the Admiral muttered. "This species is primitive. These must be fantasies or propaganda, designed to frighten enemies." The technician removed the helmet from Lee's head. The ambassador collapsed to his knees, blood running from his nose. Kim So-ra rushed to help him. "The human mind is strange," the technician said. "There are blocks and barriers I cannot break through. And these visions of vast fleets and weapons, they seem too detailed to be fiction, but too large to be real." Corvex kicked Lee in the ribs, making him gasp with pain. "What trickery is this, human? What lies have you planted in your own mind?" Lee looked up with difficulty. "No lies, Admiral. Only truth you refuse to see." "Truth?" Corvex snarled. "I see a weak species with delusions of grandeur. You're 47. Worlds are nothing compared to the Valkan Empire's might. He turned to his technicians. Try the young female. Perhaps her mind will be easier to break. No, Lee said firmly, struggling to stand. Leave her alone. I am the ambassador. Question me. But the Valkans were already grabbing Kim So-ra. She fought briefly, but the aliens were too strong. They forced the helmet onto her head as Lee and the others watched helplessly. The probe began again. Kim So-ra's body shook as the machine invaded her thoughts. On the screen, new images appeared. The Valkans saw through her memories of growing up on a world called New Busan, where floating cities drifted above endless oceans. They saw her training at the Diplomatic Academy on Mars, where students from dozens of human worlds learned to speak with alien species. They saw her first assignment on the frontier world of Sejong, where massive automated factories produced goods for 100 star systems. This is impossible, the technician said, staring at the readings. Her memories show industrial capacity beyond anything we have ever seen. Worlds transformed into single massive factories. Asteroid belts completely mined out and turned into construction materials. Admiral Korvex watched the images with growing confusion. Through Kim So-ra's memories, he saw glimpses of human civilization that defied everything he believed about this species. Automated farms that covered entire continents, producing food for billions. Space elevators reaching from planetary surfaces to orbital stations. Fusion reactors the size of cities, powering impossible projects. Most disturbing were the brief flashes of military installations. The girl had only seen them from a distance during her travels, but even those glimpses were terrifying. Fortress worlds where every mountain had been carved into weapon emplacements. Space stations that looked like metal moons, bristling with defensive systems. It still makes no sense, Korvex said, but his voice was less certain now. Two primitive minds showing the same impossible visions. The technician removed the helmet from Kim So-ra's head. She collapsed, unconscious. Captain Park caught her before she hit the floor. Enough, Park said quietly. You have your readings. Leave us alone. But Korvex was not finished. He grabbed Lieutenant Cho Min-ho and forced him into the probe chair. One more test. If three minds show the same lies, then perhaps they are not lies after all. The helmet went on to Cho's head. Being a military officer, his memories were different from the others. The Valkans saw combat training on worlds with crushing gravity, where human soldiers learned to fight in any environment. They saw weapons testing on remote moons, where new technologies were developed in complete secrecy. They saw fleet exercises involving hundreds of ships moving in perfect coordination across multiple star systems. Most shocking of all, they saw glimpses of the human military command structure. Through Cho's memories of briefings and orders, the Valkans realized that every human ship, every colony, every installation was connected in a vast network of communication and control. "Admiral," the technician said, his voice shaking, "these humans, they are not what they appear to be." Korvex stared at the screen showing Lieutenant Cho's memories. He saw images that challenged everything he thought he knew about warfare and civilization. Fleets that appeared and disappeared at will. Weapons that bent space and time. Defensive systems that made Valkan technology look like stone knives. "This cannot be real," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. The technician was studying his instruments with growing alarm. "Admiral, there is something else. All three humans have the same type of neural implant. It appears to be some kind of communication device." Communication device? Korvax's red eyes widened. You mean they could have sent messages? It is possible, Admiral. The technology is far beyond our understanding, but the energy signatures suggest quantum transmission capabilities. Korvax felt a chill run down his spine. Quantum transmission meant instantaneous communication across any distance. If the humans had sent a message before being captured, when, he demanded, when could they have sent a signal? The technician checked his readings. The residual energy patterns suggest recent activation. Perhaps an hour ago, maybe less. Admiral. Korvax looked down at Captain Park, who was still holding the unconscious Kim So-Ra. The human officer met his gaze without fear. What did you do? Korvax asked. Park smiled coldly. I followed standard procedure for first contact with hostile species. What procedure? I called for help. Korvax backhanded Park across the face, sending him sprawling. But the human captain just wiped blood from his mouth and kept smiling. You think your pathetic little fleet can challenge the might of the Valkan Empire? Korvax roared. I think, Park said quietly, that you have no idea what you have started. The Admiral turned to his technicians. Double the watch on all sensor stations. If any human ships approach, I want to know immediately. As they left the cell, Korvax tried to convince himself that the memory probes had shown him lies and fantasies, but deep in his mind, doubt was growing like a poison. What if the impossible visions were real? What if humanity was not the weak prey species he had assumed? What if he had just made the greatest mistake in Valkan history? In the darkness of their cell, Captain Park held Kim So-Ra's hand and waited. Somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, his message was racing toward human worlds. Soon, very soon, the Valkans would learn the truth about humanity, and Park suspected they would not like what they discovered. The quantum signal raced across space faster than light itself, carrying Captain Park's distress call through dimensions beyond normal understanding. It traveled through hyperspace, past sleeping gas giants and dead worlds until it reached its destination. Ganymede Station, humanity's fortress on the edge of known space. Admiral Yoon Hae-jin was reviewing supply reports when the emergency alarm began screaming through the station. She was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes like winter storms. For 30 years she had served on the frontier, watching and waiting for exactly this moment. Admiral! Lieutenant Commander Han Woo-jin burst into her office without knocking. Priority 1 message from the Meridian sector. Diplomatic mission compromised. Yoon's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. Show me. The holographic display activated, showing a 3-dimensional map of local space. A red dot pulsed in the Meridian sector, nearly 200 light-years from Ganymede Station. Captain Park's beacon activated 47 minutes ago, Han reported. The message indicates hostile first contact with a species called the Valkan Empire. Yoon set down her coffee and stood up. She had met Captain Park several times. He was a good officer who would not send a distress signal unless the situation was truly desperate. What do we know about these Valkans? She asked. Han's fingers danced over his controls. Information flowed across the display. Our long-range scouts have been watching them for 3 years. Warrior culture, aggressive expansion, 17 conquered systems. They use brute force tactics and enslave captured populations. Population of their empire? Approximately 40 billion across. Their core worlds, plus unknown numbers of slave species. Admiral Yoon studied the data with cold eyes. The Valkans were exactly the kind of species humanity had prepared for. Aggressive, militaristic, and completely convinced of their own superiority. Military assessment? She asked. Their technology is roughly equivalent to what humanity had 50 years ago, Han replied. Slower than light travel, chemical propulsion, kinetic weapons. They rely on overwhelming numbers and physical strength. Yoon almost smiled. 50 years ago, humanity had been a very different species. That was before the Great Awakening, before the discovery of zero-point energy and quantum manipulation, before humanity had transformed from curious explorers into something far more dangerous. Contact Earth Command, she ordered. Inform Admiral Kang Soo-min that Protocol 7 is now in effect. Han's eyes widened. Protocol 7 was the code for full military mobilization. It had never been used before, not even during the exercises. Admiral, are you certain? Protocol 7 will activate every hidden fleet in human space. Do it, Yoon said firmly. And send a message to Admiral Oh Dong-hyun at Mars Command. Tell him the waiting is over. Meanwhile, 200 light-years away, Admiral Corvex was trying to understand what his technicians had learned from the human prisoners. He stood on the bridge of the Dominator, staring at the small human ship in his cargo bay. The technology makes no sense, complained Chief Engineer Vex. Their computers use quantum processing arrays we cannot even begin to understand. Their power source appears to be some form of controlled antimatter reaction. Antimatter? Corvex's second-in-command, Captain Thek, looked skeptical. That is theoretical at best. No species has successfully weaponized antimatter. These humans have, Vex replied. The energy readings from their ship are unlike anything in our databases. If they can build engines like this, what else might they be capable of? Corvex was beginning to feel the first stirrings of doubt. The memory probes had shown impossible visions of human industrial capacity. Now his own engineers were confirming that human technology was far more advanced than it appeared. Sir, called the communications officer, message from High Command. They want a full report on our encounter with the humans. Corvex straightened his massive frame. The Vulcan High Command was not known for patience or understanding. They expected results, not excuses. Tell them we have captured a human vessel and live prisoners. We are investigating their technology and preparing intelligence reports. They also want to know if we recommend immediate invasion of human space. The Admiral paused. 6 hours ago, he would have answered yes without hesitation. Now, after seeing the memory fragments and examining human technology, he was less certain. Tell them we need more time to gather intelligence, he decided. Back on Ganymede Station, Admiral Yoon was watching her communications board light up like a festival. All across human space, her message was being received and acknowledged. Hidden fleets that had waited in silence for decades were powering up their engines. Admiral, reported Commander Nam Yuri from the sensor station. Ghost Fleet 7 is responding from the Tau Ceti system. Admiral Kim Jun-ho reports ready for immediate deployment. Acknowledged. What about the cloaked yards? Asteroid Base Sejong is launching Battle Group 12. Admiral Lee Sung-min says they will be ready to jump in 6 hours. Yoon nodded with satisfaction. Humanity had learned painful lessons from studying other species. Too many civilizations had fallen because they revealed their strength too early, or trusted in diplomacy when facing pure aggression. Humans had chosen a different path. For 2 centuries, they had built their true strength in secret, hidden in asteroid fields and gas giant storms, cloaked by technology that made their ships invisible to normal sensors. Ma'am, called Lieutenant Park Yoon-soo from the tactical station. We are receiving response codes from 47 battle groups. Total fleet strength available for immediate deployment, 8,436 vessels. And that is just the first wave, Yoon murmured. The numbers would have surprised her enemies, but they were only a fraction of humanity's true military capacity. Her personal communicator chimed. The face of Admiral Kang Soo-min appeared on the small screen. Kang was the overall commander of Earth's Defense Fleet, a legend among human military officers. "Hey Jin," Kang said without preamble. "I just received your Protocol 7 authorization. Tell me about the situation." Yoon quickly explained about Captain Park's distress signal and what they knew about the Valkan Empire. Kang listened without interruption, her face growing darker with each detail. "So they captured our diplomatic mission and are preparing to invade human space," Kang summarized. "Typical aggressive species behavior." "Yes, ma'am. They seem to believe humanity is weak and primitive." Kang's smile was cold as winter on Pluto. "Well, we cannot let them continue believing that, can we? I am authorizing full fleet deployment. Show them what happens when someone threatens human civilians." The communication ended, and Yoon turned back to her staff. Around the bridge, officers were working with quiet efficiency, coordinating the largest military operation in human history. "Admiral," reported Han Woo-jin, "we have a tactical problem. The Valkan fleet is 200 light-years from the nearest human base. Even with our fastest ships, it will take time to reach them." "How much time?" "Standard jump drive would require 6 hours. But what?" Han hesitated. "Admiral, if we use the experimental portal generators, we could be there in minutes." Yoon considered this. The portal generators were humanity's newest technology, devices that could create artificial wormholes across vast distances. They had been tested successfully but never used in actual combat conditions. "Risk assessment?" "Unknown, Admiral. The technology works, but we have never tried to move this many ships through portal space simultaneously. And if we wait 6 hours for conventional deployment, the Valkans might execute our people, or worse, they might try to extract more information and learn about our real capabilities." Admiral Yoon made her decision. "Contact Admiral Oh Dong-hyun at Mars Command. Tell him to prepare the portal generators for emergency deployment. We go with experimental technology." Across the solar system on Mars, Admiral Oh Dong-hyun received the message with grim satisfaction. He had been waiting decades for this moment. The massive portal generators hidden beneath the Martian surface began powering up, drawing energy from fusion reactors buried deep in the planet's core. "Sir," reported his aide, Major Jang Min-kyung, "all portal generators are online. We can open wormholes to any location within 500 light-years. "Excellent. Begin targeting the Meridian sector, and send a message to every battle group commander. We are about to show the galaxy that humanity is not to be trifled with." In the Meridian sector, Admiral Korvex was still trying to understand the human prisoners when his sensor officer made a disturbing report. "Admiral, we are detecting unusual quantum fluctuations at the edge of the system." "What kind of fluctuations?" "Unknown, sir. The energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases." Korvex felt a chill run down his spine. First the impossible technology on the human ship, then the visions of vast fleets in the prisoners' memories, and now mysterious energy readings. "Could it be natural phenomena?" he asked hopefully. "Negative, Admiral. The patterns are too regular, too organized. Someone is doing something out there." In the holding cell, Captain Park felt a faint vibration through the ship's hull. It was barely noticeable, but his military training recognized it immediately. Someone was using massive amounts of energy nearby. He smiled in the darkness. Help was coming. Space itself began to ripple near the edge of the meridian sector. What looked like empty vacuum started to shimmer and bend, as if reality was being twisted by invisible hands. The Vulcan sensors detected massive energy buildups, but their primitive technology could not understand what was happening. On the bridge of the Dominator, Admiral Korvax stared at his sensor displays with growing alarm. The readings made no sense. Energy levels were spiking to impossible heights, then vanishing completely, only to reappear somewhere else. "Report!" he barked at his sensor officer. "Sir, I am detecting quantum distortions throughout the outer system. The energy signatures are moving in patterns I cannot explain." Captain Thek moved closer to study the readings. Could it be some kind of natural phenomenon? A solar storm, perhaps? "Negative," the sensor officer replied. "The patterns are too organized. Someone is generating these distortions deliberately." Korvax felt sweat forming on his thick gray skin despite the cool air of the bridge. The impossible visions from the human prisoner's mind suddenly seemed less impossible. Distance to these distortions? Approximately 50 astronomical units from our current position, sir. At the very edge of our sensor range. And they are getting stronger? Yes, Admiral. The energy levels are increasing exponentially. Meanwhile, in the human holding cell, Captain Park Jin-woo sat quietly with his eyes closed. The others thought he was resting, but he was actually listening. The vibrations through the ship's hull were getting stronger and more frequent. Ambassador. Lee Dae-ho was helping Kim So-ra, who was slowly recovering from the mind probe. Her face was pale, but her eyes were alert again. "How are you feeling?" Lee asked softly. "Like someone took my brain apart and put it back together wrong," she replied with a weak smile. "But I will survive." Lieutenant Cho Min-ho was pacing the small cell, checking the walls and door for any weakness. "Captain, do you think help is coming?" Park opened his eyes and nodded. "Oh yes, help is definitely coming." "How can you be sure?" "Because I know how humanity responds to threats against our diplomatic missions. And I know Admiral Yoon Hae-jin personally. She does not accept defeat. On Ganymede Station, Admiral Yoon was coordinating the largest military deployment in human history. Her main display showed the positions of dozens of battle groups across human space, all converging on predetermined jump points. "Admiral," reported Commander Han Woo-jin, "portal generators on Mars are fully charged. Admiral O reports ready to open wormholes on your command." "Fleet status? First wave battle groups are in position. 47 combat units ready for immediate deployment." Yoon studied the tactical display. Each red dot represented a battle group of at least 100 ships. Destroyers, cruisers, dreadnoughts, and the massive carrier platforms that served as mobile command centers. "Ma'am," called Lieutenant Commander Park Yoon-soo from Communications, "we are receiving final confirmations from all group commanders. They are ready to proceed." Admiral Yoon took a deep breath. What she was about to do would change everything. For 2 centuries, humanity had hidden its true strength from the galaxy. Today, that secrecy would end. "Open a channel to all battle group commanders," she ordered. The main screen shifted to show dozens of faces. Men and women from every human world, officers who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Admiral Kim Jun-ho from Ghost Fleet. 7. Admiral Lee Sung-min from the asteroid shipyards. Admiral Choi Hyun-woo from the Jupiter Defense Platform. "Brothers and sisters," Yoon said formally. Today we stop hiding. Today we show the galaxy that humanity will not be threatened or enslaved. A diplomatic mission has been attacked by an aggressive species that considers us weak prey. We will correct their misunderstanding. The faces on the screen showed cold determination. These were not the faces of explorers or diplomats. These were the faces of warriors who had waited decades for this chance to defend their species. Remember, Yoon continued, we are not conquerors. We are protectors. Our goal is to rescue our people and demonstrate that attacking humanity has consequences. Use overwhelming force, but show mercy to those who surrender. Admiral, interrupted Han Woo-jin. We are receiving urgent reports from the Meridian sector. Valkan communications are increasing dramatically. They are calling for reinforcements. How many ships do they have in the area? Initial estimates suggest approximately 200 Valkan vessels. Their main fleet is concentrated around their captured prize. Yoon nodded. 200 ships against humanity's first wave deployment. The Valkans were about to learn a very painful lesson about superior numbers versus superior technology. All units, she announced to the battle group commanders. Operation Rescue Dawn is authorized. Portal deployment in 30 seconds. On Mars, Admiral Oh Dong-hyun watched his massive portal generators reach full power. The devices were engineering marvels, each one the size of a city block and buried deep beneath the planet's surface. They drew power from fusion reactors that could light up entire star systems. Sir, reported Major Jang Min-kyung, all generators are online and synchronized. Portal coordinates locked onto the Meridian sector. Energy levels? 100%. Capacity. We can maintain full portal operation for 6 hours without interruption. Oh smiled grimly. 6 hours would be more than enough. Open the portals, he commanded. Reality tore open in 47 different locations across human space. Artificial wormholes, each one large enough for an entire battle group to pass through, created shortcuts across hundreds of light years. The technology was so advanced that it made faster-than-light travel look primitive. The first ships began entering the portals immediately. Sleek human vessels that had waited in hidden bases and cloaked positions throughout the outer systems. Ships that used technologies the Valkans could not even imagine. In the Meridian sector, the quantum distortion suddenly stabilized into something far more terrifying. Space began to tear open in neat geometric patterns. Wormholes that sparkled, with barely contained energy appeared throughout the outer system. Admiral! The Valkan sensor officer's voice cracked with panic. The distortions are becoming stable. They appear to be artificial wormholes. Korvax stared at his displays in disbelief. Artificial wormholes were theoretical at best. No known species possessed such technology. That is impossible, Captain Thek said. Creating stable wormholes requires energy levels beyond anything we have ever seen. Apparently, Korvax replied slowly, we have underestimated these humans. The first human ships began emerging from the portals. They came out in perfect formation, each battle group taking predetermined positions throughout the system. The vessels looked nothing like traditional spacecraft. They were works of art and engineering combined, their hulls flowing like liquid metal, their surfaces absorbing sensor beams instead of reflecting them. How many ships are coming through? Korvax demanded. His sensor officer was staring at his instruments in shock. Sir, I am counting hundreds of vessels, maybe thousands. They are still emerging from the wormholes. Thousands? Korvax's voice was barely a whisper. The human fleet was unlike anything the Valkans had ever seen. Ships that moved without visible propulsion, turning and accelerating in ways that defied physics. vessels that seemed to bend light around themselves, making exact counts impossible. "Admiral," Captain Thek said urgently, "we should retreat immediately. We are vastly outnumbered." But Corvex was transfixed by the display. Through the portals came ships of every size and configuration, sleek destroyers that looked like metal sharks, massive carriers that bristled with launch bays, and in the center of each formation, dreadnoughts that were larger than anything the Valkan Empire had ever built. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we are receiving a transmission from the human fleet." "Put it on screen." The image that appeared made every Valkan on the bridge step backward. Admiral Yoon Hai-jin looked directly at them through the communication link. Her eyes were cold as space itself, and when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of an entire civilization. "I am Admiral Yoon Hai-jin of the Human Defense Fleet," she said calmly. "You have committed an act of war against the Human Federation by attacking our diplomatic mission. You have exactly 1 minute to release our people and surrender your vessels." Corvex found his voice with difficulty. "This is Admiral Corvex of the Valkan Empire. You are outnumbered and outgunned. We have conquered 17 star systems. We do not surrender to anyone." Yoon's expression did not change. "You are not outnumbered, Admiral. You are surrounded by a force you cannot comprehend. This is your final warning." The communication ended. On the bridge of the Dominator, silence fell like a heavy blanket. "How many ships do we count now?" Corvex asked quietly. "Over 3,000 confirmed contacts, sir. But our sensors cannot penetrate their stealth technology. There could be many more." Through the viewports, the Valkans could see the human fleet taking positions throughout the system. Ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts, their advanced cloaking technology making them nearly impossible to track. In the holding cell, Captain Park was no longer hiding his smile. He could feel the subtle changes in the ship's orientation as the Dominator was. Admiral Corvex stood frozen on his bridge as human ships materialized around his fleet like ghosts becoming solid. What had been empty space moments before now teemed with vessels that seemed to bend reality itself. His sensors, designed to track traditional spacecraft, were nearly useless against the advanced stealth technology. "Sir," his tactical officer reported with a trembling voice, "we count at least 4,000 human vessels, but the numbers keep changing as more ships decloak, or new formations arrive through the portals." 4,000? Captain Thek's massive frame shuddered. "That is impossible. No species has fleets of such size." But the evidence was right in front of them. The human ships moved with perfect coordination, taking strategic positions throughout the Meridian sector. They were not rushing to attack, but rather surrounding the Valkan fleet like hunters positioning themselves around trapped prey. "Admiral," the communications officer called out urgently, "High Command is demanding an immediate report. They want to know why we have not begun the invasion of human space." Corvex almost laughed. Invasion? He was surrounded by a force that made his own fleet look like children playing with toys. The Valkan Empire's greatest battle group consisted of 200 ships. The humans had already deployed 20 times that number, and more were still arriving. "Tell High Command," he said slowly, "that the situation has become complicated." On the bridge of the human dreadnought Inchen's Fury, Admiral Yoon Hai-jin watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. Her fleet had achieved perfect positioning around the Valkan force. Every escape route was blocked. Every tactical advantage eliminated, Admiral, reported Captain Song Ji-eun, her tactical officer, All battle groups are in position. The Vulcan fleet is completely surrounded. Enemy fleet composition? 237 vessels, all using primitive chemical propulsion and kinetic weapons. Their largest ships are approximately the size of our destroyers. Yoon nodded. The intelligence reports had been accurate. The Vulcans were a typical aggressive species that relied on overwhelming numbers and brute force. They had never encountered an enemy with truly superior technology. Any sign they are preparing to surrender? Negative, Admiral. Their communications indicate they are calling for reinforcements. Reinforcements? Yoon almost smiled. How many ships does the entire Vulcan Empire possess? Captain Song checked her database. Intelligence estimates approximately 1,500 vessels across all their conquered systems. And we have deployed 4,000 ships just for this operation, Yoon murmured. I think we can handle their reinforcements. Her personal communicator chimed. The face of Admiral Kang Soo-min appeared on the small screen, transmitted directly from Earth's orbital command center. Status report, Hai Jin, Kang said without preamble. Vulcan fleet surrounded and neutralized. No human casualties. We are preparing to extract our diplomatic team. Any resistance? Not yet. I think they are still trying to understand what they are facing. Kang's expression was grim. Our intelligence indicates this species has enslaved millions of beings across 17 star systems. What do you recommend? Yoon considered the question carefully. Humanity had always preferred peace to war, but they had learned that some species only understood strength. I recommend we demonstrate the consequences of threatening human civilians. Then we offer them a choice. Join the galactic community as equals or face systematic dismantlement of their military capability. Agreed, but first, get our people back. The communication ended, and Yoon turned to her boarding party commander. Major Lim Jun-seo was a veteran of dozens of operations, a compact man with scars on his hands and steel in his eyes. Major, your teams ready? Yes, Admiral. We have identified the Vulcan ship holding our diplomats. 3 teams are prepared for simultaneous boarding action. Remember, we want prisoners alive if possible. These Vulcans need to carry our message back to their empire. Understood, Admiral. On the Dominator, Admiral Korvex was receiving reports that made his situation clear. His fleet was not just outnumbered, it was obsolete. Human ships moved through space in ways that violated everything he knew about physics. They accelerated without visible engines, turned without momentum, and appeared or disappeared at will. Sir, his science officer reported, I am analyzing the energy signatures from the human vessels. Their power outputs are beyond our ability to measure. What do you mean? Admiral, our largest ships generate approximately 10 million watts of power. The human vessels appear to be generating power levels in the hundreds of billions of watts. Each of their destroyers outguns our entire fleet. Korvex felt his world crumbling around him. The Vulcan Empire had built its power on military supremacy. For 2 centuries, they had been the strongest force in their region of space. Now they faced an enemy that made them look primitive. Options? He asked quietly. Captain Thek studied the tactical display. We could attempt to retreat, but their ships are faster than ours. We could try to fight, but we would be annihilated in minutes, Korvex finished. There is one other option, Admiral. What? We could surrender. The word hung in the air like poison. No Vulcan fleet had ever surrendered. It was against everything their culture believed. But looking at the impossible numbers surrounding them, Corvex began to understand that cultural beliefs meant nothing when facing extinction. "Sir!" the sensor officer called out in panic. "Multiple human ships are approaching our position. They appear to be launching boarding craft." Through the viewports, they could see sleek human vessels moving closer to the Dominator. Small craft detached from the larger ships, heading directly for the Vulcan flagship. "Battle stations!" Corvex roared. "Prepare to repel boarders!" But even as he gave the order, he knew it was hopeless. If human technology was advanced enough to create artificial wormholes and power sources beyond measurement, what kind of weapons would their soldiers carry? In the holding cell, Captain Park heard the alarm klaxons begin to wail throughout the ship. He stood up and moved to the door, pressing his ear against the metal. "What is happening?" Ambassador Lee asked. "I believe," Park replied with a grin, "that the cavalry has arrived." The sound of weapons fire echoed through the corridors outside their cell. But it was brief, lasting only seconds before silence returned. "That was fast," Lieutenant Cho observed. "Human Marines are very efficient," Park explained. The cell door suddenly glowed red-hot around its locking mechanism. Someone was cutting through the metal with precision tools. Moments later, the heavy barrier fell inward with a crash. Major Lim Jun Seo stepped through the opening, followed by two soldiers in advanced combat armor. Their weapons looked more like works of art than instruments of war, but the deadly intent was unmistakable. "Captain Park?" Lim asked. "That would be me. Major Lim Jun Seo, 1st Marine Division. Admiral Yoon sends her regards and her apologies for the delay." Park smiled broadly. "No apology necessary, Major. Your timing is perfect. Are any of you injured?" Ambassador Lee stepped forward. "We have all been subjected to forced mind probes, but no permanent damage. What is the situation?" "The Vulcan fleet is surrounded and neutralized, sir. We are extracting you immediately." As they moved through the corridors of the Dominator, the human prisoners could see evidence of the boarding action. Vulcan guards lay unconscious at their posts, rendered helpless by weapons that seemed to stun rather than kill. "You did not kill them?" Kim Sora asked. "No need," Major Lim replied. "Admiral Yoon wants prisoners who can carry our message back to their empire." They reached the docking bay where human shuttles waited. Through the transparent walls, Ambassador Lee could see the impossible sight that had broken Admiral Corvex's spirit. The space around them was filled with human ships as far as the eye could see. Sleek destroyers hung motionless in perfect formation, massive carriers that looked like floating cities, dreadnoughts whose size defied belief. And still more ships were arriving through the glowing portals that connected this remote system to the heart of human space. "How many ships?" Lee asked in wonder. "Current count is approaching 6,000 vessels," Major Lim replied casually. "But this is just the first response wave. Admiral Yoon wanted to make sure we had adequate backup." Captain Park laughed. "Adequate backup? Major, there are enough. Ships out there to conquer half the galaxy." "Well," Lim said with a slight smile, "we wanted to be thorough." As their shuttle departed the Vulcan ship, they could see Admiral Corvex on the bridge, staring out at the human fleet with the expression of a man whose entire understanding of the universe had just collapsed. The sky was dark with human steel, and the Vulcan Empire was about to learn that some prey fought back. The human shuttle Busan's Hope carried the rescued diplomatic team toward Admiral Yoon's flagship through a corridor of impossible steel. Ambassador Lee Dae-ho pressed his face to the viewport, watching ship after ship pass by in perfect formation. Each vessel was a masterwork of engineering that made the new Sol look primitive by comparison. "I had no idea," he whispered to Captain Park. "In all my years of diplomatic service, I never imagined we possessed such military capacity." Park nodded grimly. "Most humans do not know either. The defense fleet operates under absolute secrecy. Only senior diplomatic staff and military officers are aware of our true capabilities." Kim Sora was staring at a massive carrier that drifted past their shuttle like a metal moon. "How long have we been building ships like these?" "Since first. Contact with the Centauri Republic 80 years ago," Park replied. "Humanity learned early that the galaxy is not a safe place for peaceful species. We decided to be ready for anything." Major Lim Junseo was monitoring communications from the pilot's seat. "Admiral Yoon is requesting immediate debriefing once we reach the flagship. She wants a full report on Vulcan capabilities and intentions." 20 minutes later, they docked with the Incheon's Fury, a dreadnought so large it had its own gravitational field. The corridors were wide enough for vehicles, and the walls hummed with barely contained power. Crew members they passed wore uniforms that looked more like space armor, and their equipment was clearly designed for combat operations. Admiral Yoon Hae-jin met them in her ready room, a space that served as both office and tactical command center. Holographic displays showed the positions of every ship in the system, human and Vulcan alike. "Ambassador Lee," she said formally, "I apologize for your ordeal. Are you and your team able to provide a full briefing?" "Of course, Admiral. Though, I must say, your response has been rather more dramatic than I expected." Yoon's smile was cold. "Humanity does not negotiate with kidnappers or tolerate threats against our diplomatic missions. Please tell me everything about your encounter with the Vulcans." For the next hour, Lee and his team described their capture, interrogation, and imprisonment. Yoon listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on her tablet. When they finished, she was quiet for several long moments. "So they subjected you to forced mind probes," she said finally, "and they saw fragments of human military capacity." "Yes," Kim Sora replied, "but they dismissed the images as fantasies or propaganda." "What exactly did they see?" Captain Park answered. "Orbital shipyards, massive fleets, industrial complexes, spanning entire continents. The usual classified material that gets stored in our neural implants." Yoon nodded. Every human who traveled beyond the borders carried the same embedded memories. It was a security measure designed to demonstrate human capability if captured. Unfortunately, most alien species were too arrogant to believe what they saw. "Admiral," Lee said carefully, "I must ask about the scale of this response. How many ships have you deployed?" "Current count is 7,400 vessels," Yoon replied matter-of-factly, "with more arriving every hour." Lee's face went pale. 7,000? For a rescue operation? This is not just a rescue, Ambassador. This is a demonstration. The Vulcans have enslaved 17 star systems and were planning to invade human space. We are making it clear that such behavior will not be tolerated. Her communicator chimed. Captain Song Ji-eun's face appeared on the small screen. "Admiral, we are receiving communications from the Vulcan High Command. They are demanding immediate release of their fleet and threatening retaliation." "Put them through to the main display." The holographic projector activated, showing a massive Vulcan with elaborate armor and ceremonial scars covering his face. This was clearly a high-ranking official, possibly the supreme commander of their empire. "I am War Master Grix of the Vulcan High Command," the alien announced. "You will release our ships immediately or face the full might of the Vulcan Empire." Admiral Yoon stood slowly, her hands clasped behind her back. "I am Admiral Yoon Haijin of the Human Defense Fleet. Your forces attacked our diplomatic mission, without provocation. This constitutes an act of war." "War?" Grix laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal. "You show us a handful of ships and speak of war? The Valkan Empire commands 1,500 vessels across 17 systems. We have conquered every species we have encountered." 1,500 ships, Yoon repeated thoughtfully. "How interesting." She gestured to Captain Song, who activated a new display showing the current tactical situation. The screen filled with red dots representing human ships, surrounding the much smaller cluster of Valkan vessels. "War Master Grix," Yoon said calmly, "I am currently deploying 7,400 ships in this system alone. This represents approximately 12% of humanity's total naval capacity." The Valkan leader's expression changed as he processed the numbers. "Impossible! No species possesses such military strength. Would you like a demonstration?" Yoon nodded to her tactical officer. Throughout the system, 1,000 human ships simultaneously fired a single pulse from their main weapons. The energy beams struck empty asteroids, vaporizing rocks the size of cities in brilliant flashes of light. "That was 1/7 of my current fleet," Yoon explained. "Each ship can repeat that attack continuously for several hours. Shall I demonstrate what 7,000 ships can accomplish?" Grix's face had gone from confident to horrified. "This is some kind of deception. Hidden weapon platforms or—" "No deception," Yoon interrupted. "Simply the reality that your intelligence services failed to discover. Humanity has been preparing for encounters with aggressive species for nearly a century." Ambassador Lee watched the exchange with fascination. This was diplomacy backed by overwhelming force, the kind that actually changed behavior rather than just exchanging polite words. "What do you want?" Grix asked, his voice much quieter now. "First, a formal apology for the attack on our diplomatic mission. Second, immediate cessation of all military operations against civilian populations in your empire. Third, the release of all enslaved species under Valkan control." "And if we refuse?" Admiral Yoon's expression remained perfectly calm. "Then we will systematically disable every military installation in your empire. Your ships will be captured or destroyed. Your weapon manufacturing facilities will be neutralized, and your ability to threaten others will be permanently eliminated. You cannot occupy 17 star systems. We do not need to occupy them. We simply need to remove your ability to harm others. The enslaved populations will be liberated and given the choice of independence or joining the Human Federation as protected members." Grix stared at the display showing the massive human fleet. Each ship represented technology beyond Valkan, understanding, weapons that could crack planets, and industrial capacity that defied imagination. "You would destroy an entire civilization?" he asked. "We would destroy a civilization that exists by enslaving others," Yoon corrected. "The Valkan people themselves would be offered the same choice as everyone else. Join the galactic community as equals, or remain isolated under strict supervision." The communication fell silent as Grix considered his options. Behind him, other Valkan officials were frantically studying their own displays, trying to comprehend the scale of the force arrayed against them. "How long do we have to decide?" Grix asked finally. 24 hours, Yoon replied. "During which time our humanitarian fleets will begin liberating your slave worlds. Any interference with those operations will be considered a hostile act." The communication ended abruptly. In Admiral Yoon's ready room, silence fell like a heavy blanket. Humanitarian fleets? Ambassador Lee asked. Battle Group 16 through 25, Yoon explained. They specialize in planetary liberation operations. Each group includes medical ships, supply vessels, and enough firepower to eliminate any resistance. Captain Park shook his head in amazement. We really have been preparing for everything, haven't we? Humanity learned early that peace requires strength, Yoon replied. And sometimes protecting the innocent requires demonstrating that strength to those who would abuse it. Through the viewports of the Incheon's fury, they could see human ships spreading throughout the system like a tide of steel. The sky had indeed turned dark with the promise of overwhelming force, and the Valkan Empire was beginning to understand that their age of conquest was over. The question now was whether they would accept the new reality peacefully or force humanity to demonstrate just how thorough their preparations had been. On the Valkan homeworld of Grixar, panic filled the command chambers of the High Council. War Master Grix stood before a massive display showing the tactical situation in the Meridian sector. The red dots representing human ships seemed to multiply before their eyes as more vessels continued arriving through the mysterious portals. 1,500 ships against over 7,000, muttered Council Leader Vorth. And they claim this is only 12% of their total fleet. War Master. Grix's hand shook as he studied the impossible numbers. If their claim is accurate, they could deploy nearly 60,000 vessels. That is more than every known species combined. It must be a deception, insisted General Krell. No civilization could hide such massive military capacity. Where would they build so many ships? How would they maintain them? But even as he spoke, reports were coming in from across the Valkan Empire. Human ships were materializing in every conquered system, emerging from nowhere like ghosts becoming solid. The liberation of slave worlds had begun. In the Talox system, Admiral Lee Sung-min commanded Battle Group 18 as it surrounded the orbital slave processing facility. The massive space station had been built to break the spirits of captured populations before shipping them to work camps throughout the Empire. Attention Valkan forces, Admiral Lee broadcast. This is the Human Liberation Fleet. You will immediately cease all operations and prepare for inspection. Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force. The Valkan commander of the facility, Colonel Vex, stared at his sensors in disbelief. 200 human ships had appeared without warning, their sleek hulls reflecting the system's pale sun. They moved with perfect precision, taking strategic positions that eliminated any chance of escape. How did they get here so fast? His aide asked. Unknown, Vex replied. Our long-range sensors detected nothing until they were already in formation. On the surface of Talox Prime, the enslaved population looked up at the sky with wonder. Brilliant, streaks of light marked the passage of human shuttles heading toward the surface. For the first time in decades, hope flickered in their eyes. Dr. Shin Ai-Ra stepped off the first shuttle, followed by a team of human medical personnel and Marines. She was a xenobiologist specializing in alien psychology and trauma recovery. Behind her came supplies that could feed and heal an entire world. Attention, people of Talox, she announced through translation devices. I am Dr. Shin Ai-Ra of the Human Federation. You are now under our protection. The Valkan occupation of your world is over. Similar scenes were playing out across 17 star systems. Human fleets appeared with mathematical precision at every Valkan military installation, every slave processing center, every orbital weapons platform. The liberation was coordinated down to the second, demonstrating an organizational capability that staggered the enemy. Back in the Meridian sector, Admiral Yoon watched reports flowing in from the Liberation fleets. Her tactical display showed human forces deploying across hundreds of light years, moving through portal networks that connected the entire operation. "Admiral," reported Captain Song Ji-yoon, "Battle Group 22 has secured the Korthak system. Admiral Kim Jun-ho reports minimal resistance and successful liberation of approximately 40 million enslaved beings. Casualties? 0 human. Casualties. Vulcan losses limited to disabled ships and unconscious personnel. Admiral Kim's forces used non-lethal suppression techniques throughout the operation." Ambassador Lee, who had been observing from the command center, shook his head in amazement. "You are liberating entire star systems without killing anyone?" "When possible," Admiral Yoon replied. "Our weapons can be set to stun or disable, rather than destroy. We prefer to demonstrate overwhelming capability rather than overwhelming violence." "But surely some Vulcan forces are resisting." Captain Song consulted her reports. "Sporadic resistance in 3 systems. The Vulcans seem confused by our tactics. They keep expecting us to behave like conquerors, but we are acting like, well, like liberators." On the Vulcan homeworld, the High Council was receiving similar reports with growing desperation. Every military commander was asking the same question. How do you fight an enemy that appears everywhere at once and fights with weapons you cannot understand? "They have taken the Ryloth system," reported General Krell. "Complete occupation in less than 3 hours. The Zephyrian worlds have fallen," added Admiral Thok. "Our forces there report being surrounded by ships that seem to come out of empty space." War Master Grix studied the strategic display with the sick realization that his empire was being systematically dismantled. Each red X marked a system that had fallen to human forces. The pattern was spreading across their territory like an infection. "How many systems have we lost?" he asked quietly. 11 out of 17, came the devastating reply. "And human forces are approaching the remaining 6. Time to reach our homeworld?" At their current rate of advance, perhaps 6 hours, the council chamber fell silent. In less than a day, the mighty Vulcan Empire had been reduced to its core systems by an enemy they had never even known existed. Meanwhile, in the Meridian sector, Admiral Yoon received a priority communication from Earth. The face of Admiral Kang Soo-min appeared on her personal display. "Status report, Hae-jin. Liberation proceeding on schedule. 14 systems secured, 3 in progress. Total human casualties remain at 0. Vulcan response? Confused and demoralized. They seem unable to comprehend our tactical doctrine. Most of their forces are surrendering without significant resistance." Admiral Kang nodded with satisfaction. "And the civilian populations? Grateful and cooperative. Dr. Shin's medical teams report that most liberated worlds are celebrating. Apparently, the Vulcans were not popular rulers." "I imagine not. What about the Vulcan leadership? Still refusing to communicate. But I expect that will change once our liberation fleets reach their core systems." The communication ended, and Admiral Yoon turned her attention back to the tactical display. Her fleet had grown to over 8,000 ships as additional battle groups arrived. Through the portal network, the sky around the captured Vulcan vessels was now completely dark with human steel. Captain Park Jin-woo, who had been listening to the reports, approached Admiral Yoon with a question. "Admiral, may I ask what happens after the liberation is complete? We cannot occupy 17 star systems indefinitely." "We do not intend to," Yoon replied. Once the slave populations are freed and the Valkan military is neutralized, we will offer each world a choice. They can join the Human Federation as protected members, declare independence, or form their own alliances. And the Valkans themselves, they will be given the same choice. Join the galactic community as equals, or remain isolated under observation, to ensure they do not threaten others again. Ambassador Lee found himself impressed by the scope of human planning. This was not conquest for the sake of territory or resources. It was systematic intervention to protect the innocent and eliminate a threat to galactic peace. "How long have you been preparing for this type of operation?" he asked. 87 years, Admiral Yoon replied. "Ever since we learned that aggressive species like the Valkans existed, humanity decided early that we would never allow genocide or slavery to flourish while we had the power to stop it." On his flagship, Admiral Corvex received the news that his empire was falling with a mixture of despair and awe. The humans had not just defeated the Valkan military, they had rendered it irrelevant. Their ships appeared and disappeared at will, their weapons disabled rather than destroyed, and their coordination was flawless. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving surrender offers from our commanders in 7 systems. They say resistance is futile." Corvex looked around his bridge at officers who had once believed themselves the masters of the galaxy. Now they sat in defeated silence, surrounded by a force that made their mightiest achievements look like children's toys. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "it is time to learn what these humans really want." The sky was dark with human steel, and the age of Valkan conquest was ending not with violence, but with the simple demonstration that true strength came from protecting the weak rather than exploiting them. 3 months after the liberation of the Valkan Empire, Ambassador Lee Dae-ho stood on the observation deck of the New Sol as it approached the Valkan homeworld of Grixar. The diplomatic mission that had started with his capture was now concluding, with the formal integration of 17 star systems into the galactic community. The space around Grixar looked very different from 3 months ago. Where once Valkan warships had patrolled in aggressive formations, now human and former slave, vessels worked together in peaceful cooperation. Orbital stations that had been weapons platforms were being converted into hospitals and schools. "It is remarkable," said Kim Sora, standing beside him. The scar on her lip had healed, but she carried the memory of Valkan brutality as a reminder of why their mission had been necessary. 3 months ago, this was the center of a slave empire. Now it looks like any peaceful system. Captain Park joined them at the viewport. "The transformation has been faster than anyone expected. Most Valkan military personnel have adapted well to their new roles." Down on the planet's surface, former War Master Grix was preparing for the ceremony that would formally end the old empire and establish the new Valkan Republic. He wore simple robes instead of battle armor, and his ceremonial scars had been replaced with symbols of peace. The great assembly hall of Grixar was filled with representatives from every world in the former empire. Humans sat beside Valkans, who sat beside the dozens of species that had been enslaved for generations. It was the most diverse gathering in the planet's history. Admiral Yoon Hai-jin entered the hall wearing her formal diplomatic uniform rather than military dress. Behind her walked Dr. Shin A-ra, whose medical teams had treated millions of beings across the liberated worlds. The transformation from military operation to humanitarian mission was complete. "Citizens of the former Valkan Empire," Admiral Yoon began, her voice carrying through translation devices to every species present. 3 months ago, this region of space was ruled by fear and oppression. Today, we gather to celebrate the birth of a new age of cooperation and mutual respect. In the audience, Captain Hong Ji-min of the original diplomatic escort team watched with pride. She had been promoted to admiral and given command of the new Joint Defense Fleet, a multi-species force designed to prevent future conflicts. The Human Federation does not seek to rule other worlds, Admiral Yoon continued. We seek only to ensure that every sentient being has the right to live free from fear and oppression. Today, 17 star systems join the galactic community as equal partners. Former War Master Grix stood and approached the podium. The massive Valkan looked smaller than he had during the height of his empire's power, but his bearing showed a dignity that had been absent during his days as a conqueror. I speak for all Valkans when I say we are grateful for the mercy shown to us, he began. We expected destruction when your fleets arrived. Instead, you offered us redemption. You showed us that true strength comes from protecting others, not dominating them. He paused, looking out at the diverse assembly. The Valkan people were taught that conquest was the only path to greatness. We have learned that cooperation achieves far more than violence ever could. Ambassador Lee watched the ceremony with deep satisfaction. This was what diplomacy could accomplish when backed by the strength to enforce justice. The Human Federation had not conquered the Valkan Empire. They had transformed it into something better. Behind the podium, a massive display showed the current status of all 17 systems. What had once been a map of conquest was now a chart of reconstruction and growth. Former slave worlds were becoming thriving colonies, their populations finally free to pursue their own destinies. The Talok system has established its first planetary government in 40 years, reported Dr. Shin to the assembly. Population health has improved dramatically and their agricultural output has tripled since liberation. Similar reports came from every liberated world. The Zephyrian colonies had rebuilt their cities and were now exporting advanced technology. The mining worlds of the Korthak system had established workers' councils and were sharing profits with all inhabitants instead of funneling wealth to Valkan overlords. The economic transformation has been extraordinary, reported Admiral Kim Jun-ho, who now served as coordinator for the reconstruction efforts. Total productivity across all 17 systems has increased by 400% in just 3 months. This was the true power of freedom, Ambassador Lee reflected. When beings were allowed to work for their own benefit rather than for distant masters, they accomplished miracles. Former Admiral Korvex, now serving as a liaison between human and Valkan forces, stood to address the assembly. His voice carried none of the arrogance that had marked their first encounter. 3 months ago, I believed the Valkan way was the only path to order in the galaxy, he said honestly. I saw weakness in diplomacy and strength only in conquest. I was wrong about everything. He gestured to the diverse crowd around him. Today, I see true strength. Dozens of species working together, sharing knowledge and resources, protecting each other from threats. This is what civilization should look like. The assembly erupted in applause from dozens of different species, each expressing approval in their own way. The sound was like music compared to the harsh military commands that had once echoed through these halls. Admiral Yoon stepped forward for the final part of the ceremony. In her hands, she carried a data tablet containing the formal charter that would establish the new governmental structure. By the authority granted to me by the Human Federation Council and with the consent of all represented worlds, I hereby establish the Meridian Cooperative, she announced. A free association of sovereign worlds dedicated to mutual defense, trade, and cooperation. The charter was signed by representatives from every world, each adding their species mark to the historic document. When Grix added his signature as the first elected leader of the new Valkan Republic, the transformation was complete. As the ceremony concluded, Captain Park found himself thinking about the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. What had started as a simple diplomatic mission had revealed the true scope of human preparation for galactic threats. "Captain," called a familiar voice. Lieutenant Cho Min-ho approached with a smile. He had been promoted to commander and given charge of the new multi-species officer training program. "How are the joint training exercises going?" Park asked. "Better than expected. Valkan officers are excellent students when they are not trying to conquer everything in sight, and the former slave species bring knowledge and skills that complement human technology perfectly." Through the great windows of the assembly hall, they could see the orbital shipyards where the new joint defense fleet was being constructed. Human technology combined with Valkan engineering and alien innovation was producing vessels unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Sir," Commander Cho continued, "there is something else you should know. Long-range scouts have detected another, aggressive species in the outer regions. The hegemony of Sarak. They appear to be expanding toward former Valkan territory." Captain Park nodded grimly. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and there would always be threats to peaceful civilizations. But now humanity was no longer alone in facing those threats. How many worlds are in their empire? 43 confirmed systems. They use biological weapons and practice mass extermination of conquered populations. And our response? Admiral, Yoon is already coordinating with the Meridian Cooperative Defense Council. If the hegemony moves against any member world, they will face the combined fleets of 18 species. Park smiled. The hegemony of Sarak was about to learn the same lesson the Valkans had discovered. Attacking peaceful civilizations had consequences, and those consequences were growing stronger every day. As the ceremony ended and representatives began departing for their homeworlds, Ambassador Lee gathered his team for the journey back to human space. Their mission was complete, but the work of building a better galaxy was just beginning. "Where to next, Ambassador?" asked Kim So-ra as they boarded the New Sol. "The Andromeda sector," Lee replied. "We have received reports of a species called the Tyrax Confederation that might benefit from diplomatic contact. And if diplomacy fails?" Lee looked back at the orbital shipyards where joint defense fleet vessels were being launched daily. Ships that carried the combined knowledge and determination of free peoples who had learned to work together. "Then, we will demonstrate once again that the age of conquest is over," he said simply. The New Sol departed Grixar surrounded by an honor escort of Valkan, Taloxian, Zephyrian, and human vessels. Where once a single human ship had seemed helplessly alone, now it traveled as part of a growing community of free worlds. Behind them, the Meridian sector continued its transformation. Former weapons factories were producing agricultural equipment. Military academies had become universities. Slave camps had been torn down and replaced with cities where all species lived as equals. The sky was no longer dark with steel, but bright with the promise of a future where freedom would always find defenders. And somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, other aggressive species were beginning to